Hello and welcome. Today we've got Decode, and we are going to be discussing parasites, cloning centers, drones, human hosting, Donald Marshall, and much more. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to our Telegram channels and to nicholasveniamin.com for my free email updates. And if you're watching this for the first time on YouTube, I will leave the link below in the description for the full interview. Unless, of course, myself and Jean can choose our words wisely due to the insane censorship that's happening right now. Jean, thank you for joining me. How are you and what have you been up to?
Oh, just, we had Thanksgiving in the U.S., so had the local, or had the health coordinator come over and a couple of my long-term students / friends. And we had a fabulous meal, but in going out and getting all the materials for my wife to prepare the meal, the shutter shed all over me. And so they gave me back Morgellons. And so with the protocol now, I get over it real quick. So I'm just getting the scabs. It's all healed up. The sores are closed. It's just getting the skin healed up. So it's only Thursday. So today's Monday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days, and 3.5. So it's pretty quick to get over it now with the protocols. And the health coordinator visiting, we put together an anti-shedding protocol, which we'll be finalizing, and that'll be available to the world within the next, by the end of this week. And so that's really important because I've been getting lots of emails of people that are having massive symptoms all the way up to like migraines and nosebleeds and literally getting so sick they couldn't get out of bed and all this. So this will help people that go, we still have to be in the public and go out and about periodically. So when you're exposed to the people that have been jabbed, the shedding is serious, especially the longer they're out and the more times they have been, the more they shed. And so I went to the dog park also with them during that time, and I'm staying 30 feet away because even with my collar up and around, it was a down sweater, and I felt one of the needles go through the collar, and I pulled it back and literally could see where it went in, and I could see the little black piece of metal sticking out. And so the Natrachlor from Kiwi's Corner really kills it really quick on the outside, and then I just take a washcloth and wipe it off. But, it did get in me, so I had some effects from it. And so just dealing with that and trying to get the last, we're working on getting the last bugs out of the website, trying to get it up hopefully the end of this week or next week. And then got my office turned into a studio and soundproofing on the wall. Be shortly getting a mic because I know lots of people complain I'm soft-spoken and they have trouble hearing me. So that'll be coming soon. We're out.
Well, it sounds like you've been very busy. I'm glad to hear that you're getting better. And I hope that you, and of course, all the viewers who are listening today have had a wonderful, happy Thanksgiving. Now, I want this interview to be about cloning when we're going forward with, parasites and things like that. And the reason why, Jean, is because there are things that are happening that are very serious right now. That's been going on for a very long time, that high-level people are unable to discuss because they probably want to talk about it, to tell the world of what's happening, but they can't because they know that they will be attacked by the media. So we've decided together to do this interview about these topics on cloning, parasites, Vrils, the Vril Society. Some of you may have heard that. So that we could do the lower level stuff where we can discuss that because we know we're not going to be attacked by the media, and start putting it out there in consciousness to start shifting consciousness so that we could wake up even more. Okay. Because I don't think it's not spoken about a lot. Now, when we talk about cloning, Vrils, parasites, or drones, to somebody that's never, ever heard of this ever before, they have no idea what this is. What do you say to them, Jean? How do you start it off? What's the first thing you'd say to them? If you could give us a presentation, if you like, a verbal presentation of where do you begin when you explain to someone who has absolutely no idea of what's going on in this area?
Well, I go depending on the person, always when I red pill. So if I'm talking to them and I get into that subject one way or another, I see where they're at. So if they're thinking you can't clone at all, it's never been done, I go to the history of cloning. So bacteria was cloned, way back in shortly after they found out about, DNA. They actually started cloning bacteria. And then, of course, there's Dolly the sheep that was cloned. And, people can look at it very easily and see that they cloned Dolly. If you give me a screen share, I can actually pull that up really quick and just show a little thing on that. So here, just duck, duck, go. Dolly, this cloning Dolly sheep. So Dolly the sheep, since 1996, when Dolly was born, the other sheep, they clone from adult cells. They've also done that with cats, rabbits, horses, dogs, pigs, goats, cattle, etc. Mouse, 2004, was cloned using a nucleus of the cell. And then you can go read the article there. Just click on that. There's the article about cloning Dolly the sheep. And then furthermore, you can go look into other cloning that they've done through here. And so you can also go to clone and cloning, the history of cloning. All I did is put history of cloning in. 1958, cloning began. 1964, cloning of animal cells. They've already gotten down to where they're cloning it here in Japan from cells found in cow's milk. And so, obviously this has been coming a long time. It's not something brand spanking new. And then most people are familiar with the movie, The Boys from Brazil. Actually, a lot of movies are just the deep state revealing it so that if the information comes out, they can just say, that's a movie, that's not real. But that was real. The clone 90, I think it was 94, 96, somewhere in there, one of those two. You can read this article, it's in here. Copies of Hitler and put them in families, 94. So into situations and then killed, the certain people that Hitler lost in his life, primary people, so that they would have the same environment growing up. And so this is, going into The Boys from Brazil in that movie. The actors, here's the cast, and that going into that cloning situation. So, you can look up how Dolly and all that was cloned, and all of that information is very, very easy to find. And then another thing I'll go into, if they're seeming to be pretty wide open about it, is I'll talk about the different types of clones. So a lot of people are familiar with the situation and where one of our presidents went to China and he threw up on the premier of China because he was a type of clone that's known as a robotoid that they make at Bethesda in Maryland, where they put somebody in a booth that hits them with a low-level particle beam that it just passes through, and it analyzes their genetics, and it downloads all of their memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything. And then it puts that on a hard drive or a floppy, and then they take the person out, and the particle beam is upped in power, and it literally, almost like Star Trek, beaming, but you're not beaming anybody. You're literally from energy creating a matter copy. And those copies, of course, don't have an internal power supply. So they, like in the movie Tron, they start to de-res over time. And so they have to go back to Camp David on a regular basis to get recharged. And so in the situation where that president was visiting and he threw up, it was because during his speech, and that's why you see now presidents have two items on each side of them. It's to keep this from happening, to reflect those beams, that they hit him with a sonic beam that was at his resonant frequency, which would have killed him. But because he was a robotoid type clone, he was starting to de-res. His frequency was dropped down, so it made him very ill. So later he threw up, and then at the meal, he slid under the table. I'm pretty sure it was China. Might have been Japan. I may be slightly off and stole a little bit out of it because of the shedding. I'm pretty sure it was China. And then go into the next type of clone that Donald Marshall goes into, which is Vril. And Vril were found when they were making the dumps, and especially the maglevs, and going through all the old tunnels and mine shafts. They use a lot of mining areas and a lot of the old mines and old tunnels and things. They found this little tiny, about 2 to 3 foot type of lizard kind of creature, reptile. And on top of its head, it had a proboscis. And one of the people that was involved, one of them got on his face and injected down his optic nerve some materials. And those materials went into the person's brain, and he died. But he came back to life, a little over a week later, but he was different. And what had happened is the Vril, kind of like the old movie Pod People, except in this case, it literally reanimated him and took over his personality, his memories and everything. But and this is the case with Biden, Smokey Joe, in which for about 2 or 3 years, it has full access to the memories, but it's only running on the first 4 energy centers, it's not running on the heart center, though. It's running on the root center, the dantian, the solar plexus center, and the will. So it's able to control the person for 2 to 3 years, and then it starts losing control, and it starts losing access to the memory. And in that point, the person looks exactly like someone getting dementia and Alzheimer's, where they start forgetting where they're at, forgetting how to say, words, how to remember things, even who's there. Like with Smokey Joe, when he's running, he introduced his daughter as his wife, and I'm running for Congress, all kinds of crazy stuff we all remember. And it gets worse and worse and worse until eventually the person dies from it, just like with Alzheimer's dementia situation. Same situation, but they forget how to even the bodily functions, and the Vril loses control. Then the next type is, of course, the type like Dolly the sheep, where they use cellular tissue. And then now the last type is where they can literally get any cellular tissue, erase the DNA, and pass through somebody else. And this is David Wilcock went into this, where Louis T. Montagnier actually did an experiment where he passed laser light through a frog cell into a salamander, I believe it was. And when the egg into the egg of a salamander, and when the egg came out, it was a frog. And so they can actually rewrite the DNA by passing it from one cell to another. And they'll actually make it easier by erasing the nuclear information in the cellular, nucleus. And that's why you saw in that Dolly the sheep, they were going into the nucleus, because they were looking at doing this, where they could just pass a frequency through somebody into some stem cells that have had the genetic code erased and make a copy of the person. And the problem they have with the clones is that, and this is why they have research in several of the dumps that they used to have in California and out in also in Nevada, in the area, Dugway Proving Ground areas, and those. They're researching chromosomes, certain chromosomes like 51, 52, 26, 27, 21, et cetera, because the clones aren't absolutely identical. Like if a person has non-attached earlobes, they would wind up having attached earlobes, or the eyes might be a little off. Certain, memories might be missing. And so they're trying to get it, absolutely identical, but they have not gotten to that point, like we saw with Jeffrey Epstein, where the person later that they showed that was on the dead person wasn't identical to the pictures of him when he was alive, because that wasn't really him that was killed. It was a clone that was killed. And so it's a close enough thing that the average person not knowing this stuff, not looking for it, won't catch it. But it's not close enough for those of us who know.
Right. We understand that cloning and reals are slightly different because they can take your blood and they can clone you through in the cloning centers. And the people that are managing the cloning centers, from the information that I found, were people that have been body snatched by the lizards, if you like, and they have moved their own consciousness into the human body, but killing the human consciousness in that human body. And that's why we see, pedophiles and human trafficking, and people think, well, how can humans do this? Well, it's because their consciousness is not human. It's they're parasites, they're lizards that have moved their consciousness into these beings, and they have no empathy, and they're just very, very good at faking empathy. What are your thoughts on that?
Exactly. It's two reasons. In the Vril situation, like I said, the heart center is skipped. The energy center, the little computer ball of fiber optics that conduct ultraviolet light, the acupuncture meridians, come together in balls that are little like servers in our body. The Hindus and the ancient Indians could observe them, and they spin. So they call them chakras, which is a term in Hindu, I believe, that means spinning wheel. And so these spinning wheels, they could see the light and the energy spinning in them in different colors and frequencies. There's different variations depending on the location. Well, the Vril doesn't activate the heart because it doesn't want empathy. It wants to control the person and not have any of their memories, their cellular memories, the unconscious, interfere, so that it can make the being, that it's now controlling, do anything it wants. Additionally, when a person dies, of course, the soul leaves. So now in the Vril and all the other situations too, a clone doesn't have a soul. From my information, when they do that, a soul doesn't come in there. So that is our moral center. Is our soul is what gives us the feeling of what's right and wrong, and being kind and considerate, and have some empathy and respect for others. Without that, you're a sociopath or a psychopath. More often, a psychopath. And so that's another thing that you can tell, because with psychopaths in Japanese, the term is sympaku eye, where if you look at a person's eye, like I look at your eyes right now, and I can only see the whites of your eyes on the right and the left side of your iris. And so I don't see white on the bottom. I don't see three whites. And sympaku eye, the three whites is a sociopath. Four whites, like you see with Shifty Chef, that's a psychopath. And so if you look at some of the worst killers we've known, and the mass murders and those things, you'll see four whites, where you see white all, and their eyes don't have to be that wide open. And it literally, over time, it looks like their eyes are starting to bug out of their head, because they're getting, the no empathy. And the way it is, it actually causes the structure of the eye to change to where you see four whites. You see white all around the eye, the color of the eye, the iris.
Wow. Well, very interesting. And why are these lizards, you mentioned 2 to 3 foot lizards. Where do they come from, and how did they get here?
From my understanding, they're actually indigenous, and they live beneath the earth in tunnels and little caves and caverns and that. And they discovered them with Project Mark Rand, which is the big project to make all the DUMBs and all this. Miners and things, of course, knew about them a long time ago, and were careful, because there has been situations, cave-ins, et cetera, like mining, where they get trapped and somebody gets knocked out, and a Vril lizard comes over the person, while they're unconscious. And, the person dies, and they haul the body out, and then later the person reanimates. And of course, somebody's been dead, and then they reanimate, back then they usually would burn the person, because they realized that they've been possessed. So now, the cabal uses that so that they have a copy that will have no empathy, no compassion, and be able to serve them in how they want.
Let's talk about cloning and how they clone a person or a celebrity, because it happens a lot in celebrities, and they're controlled. Well, that's why we look at them and they look really not there. They torture them if they don't comply. And then they kill them in the clone body, and then they move their consciousness into another clone body, and they repeat the same situation. So it's endless murder, endless torture for that same person, and endless bodies. What are your thoughts about that? If you could explain that to us, please, Gene.
Well, depends on the person. If they're, knowing they're going to become extremely famous, they keep the original in a cage in a dump. Because if you keep copying a copy, you get genetic fading. Just like in an old VCR tape or a cassette tape, and you would make a copy, and then your friend would make a copy from the copy he got from you, and then on and on and on. Pretty soon you don't have video. 8 copies down, you don't even have audio anymore. Same thing happens with genetic copying. It's called genetic drift, where you get drift and you get fading to where it's no longer viable. And so if they know they're going to need to make many, many, many copies, they will keep the original in a cage, and the original is quantumly entangled to the clone. So it is aware and experiencing everything that the clone is getting and having. And so there's Bernie Mac and a bunch of the African-American gentlemen, where I don't have, able to pull it up right now because I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but they were riding in a limo and talking about this and saying, well, if I'm the clone, I'm going to enjoy my wife and this and that. And I consider all of what I have mine. And, but the original is, that may have been originally the originals. And so these stars, when they sign on the line, they sign away their soul, they get cloned also. They don't even know that was part of the deal. But they get taken down to these cloning centers, and they live out their life in a cage while the clones are being them. So, this is always the case with the high level people within the media, and the high level, with very few exceptions. There are a few minor exceptions of alliance personnel now, and some people a long time ago that got around this, and then politicians as well, that are run by the cabal. And then people who get really, really famous, it's wise to have security and people around you if you go out in public. One of the reasons I'm not allowed to go out in public much, in trying to keep who I am, because, I was going to go to some of these events where Flynn and all these people are talking, and they told me no way ever. Because to grab somebody, put in a syringe, put them out, chloroform them, whatever, and have, you can already get at a previous meeting, get their DNA, have a clone ready to go. They anesthetize the person, take the original away, and literally in seconds, person goes in the bathroom, somebody else comes out. Literally in seconds, they're switched out. And most people don't realize it. And so you'll notice, because they don't have a soul, the person starts to change their behavior. They start to get less empathic, empathy. They have less empathy, and they get less scruples. They're willing to undermine you, to turn on you. They don't agree with you like they used to on major topics. I don't agree. I don't agree. I don't agree with things they were fine with you before. And that's, as that time goes on, it'll get worse and worse and worse. And, you'll lose best friends, and you'll lose people, long-term associations, because you found out it's not the same person anymore. And a lot of the clones, they don't know they're even clones, but they've been switched out. And so, in these conferences and things like that, I don't go because there have been people within those that have been switched out. And, over long term, we can start noticing the way they talk and what they talk about and the things they say is no longer making sense, because the truth makes sense. It fits together. You hear one person talking about things, it fits in with things. If you do your research, it all fits together. But the lies, even though they're vast in their, they don't fit. It doesn't, like if you look at 911 and you look at the speed that the towers fell, it's not possible, because it's actually, in one case, faster than free fall. It's faster than a brick falling in a vacuum or in the atmosphere. You drop a brick, the building beat it down because it's being sucked down into its footprint by the nanothermite and the pyrotechnic. So it's being pulled faster than gravity can pull it in. So this collapsing and all this, like building 7. That's why they say they're going to pull it. That's the term in demolitions. And so, the falling narrative, the lie of that doesn't fit. And of course, if you're looking, the lie that was planes in this, well, then why'd 7 come down? So if you're thinking logically and you say, well, this and this, certain things can't add up. It's just like we see with a jab where, when I went to the dentist and I told the dental assistant, I had red pill both of them. I said, I hope you guys, winter's coming now. It's going to get really cold. So I hope you have a jacket and wear that when you go out, because I don't want to freeze to death. If you don't wear a jacket, I might freeze to death, because that's the same logic we see with the jab. If everybody has it and one person doesn't, everybody who has it is threatened by the other person who doesn't have it. Well, what's the point of it then? If it doesn't protect you from somebody who doesn't have it, doesn't protect you from getting variations and all kinds of other stuff, and it's not even stopping the original, supposedly. Why would you want to get it if there's all kinds of side effects? I mean, obviously you wouldn't. So the lies never mesh together. The truth always comes out if you're a rational, logically thinking, reasonably intelligent person and with an open mind. And the same thing goes when you're dealing with clones. Is you've known that person a while, they start to not fit the pattern you're familiar with that person. Radical differences in their behavior, the things that they agree and don't agree with you, the way they in the relationship, they get way more aggressive, way less, like you said, they don't have any empathy.
So let's say now they've created a clone and they want to move that person's consciousness, from the original body into the clone. How do they do that?
They've had this technology, and it was actually, again, they always use long-range preconditioning. So the movies always show this. There was a original the original Star Trek series in which Captain Kirk and another doctor, a lady, went into a machine they found on another planet. She took him unconscious and switched her consciousness with his, so that she was in his body and he was in hers. And so they've had this ability to switch consciousness from body to body. They can switch one and the other at the same time, or they can have, a body, the clone body, and take a consciousness and move it. For them, it's immortality. And actually, originally, up until the after 1990s, I think it was 1997, the portals they were using in the space program actually did not transfer the body. It cloned the body. It made a copy. It disintegrated the body at one side and then recomposed a new body from energy into matter, and then transferred the consciousness through the portal. What was the only thing really going through was information and the energy. So there was no actual transfer of changing the matter of the body into energy, transferring it to the other side, reassembling it. They tore it apart and then reassembled a new one at the other end. And the consciousness, which is energy, was transferred into the new body, but it didn't have a clone. It didn't have a soul. So now again, it's a clone. It's another type of clone. It's a portal clone. Kind of like the Robotoid clones, pretty much the same thing. It's essentially a Robotoid, but it has no soul now. And so up until the late 90s, all the people in the space programs, they found that out. And then they were like, wow. And there was a twilight zone in which guy realized that's what was going to happen, and he wouldn't go through the portal. And so now they've upgraded the portals where it's actually, like in Star Trek, I don't want to have my atoms torn apart, thrown across space, reassembled at the other end. That's now what it does.
If you could please explain, Gene, what's the difference between a clone and a real?
Well, again, a clone is actually a copy of the body, and the consciousness moved into it. Or it's just copied. And when you clone, all of the memories can be uploaded onto computer systems and downloaded into the new body. So it's a copy. In the case of the Vril, the body's not copied. The consciousness, the soul and the original person dies and leaves, and the vril takes over the body and reanimates it. So the body is the original, but what's in there, the person that you may have known, that could have been your friend or a politician or somebody like this, like Smokey Joe. That's not the original Smokey Joe. That's the consciousness and the energy structure and some of the actual genetic material of a lizard creature thing.
Do you think that the original Sleepy Joe back 10 years ago, for instance, was a vril?
Not 10 years ago, no. But if you look at pictures of him back then, this is like really bizarre, because you look at, pictures of who we have now and who we had then, they're not the same. So the vril took over a clone. So you have a vril clone, a real clone that's been vrilled. So now we got a double whammy here.
Wow. So let's talk about, for an example, if they were to take your blood and they were to clone you, can they explain how that clone will be as old as you from when the blood was conceived, and how it would look? How old can they get it?
Well, with the space programs technology, not only can they reverse age somebody, they can forward age somebody. So they can take the clone, it would be a baby when it first is born, and they can forward the age very, very quickly in a matter of weeks, get it to any age they want it to be. So if they're cloning somebody who's in their 70s or 50s or 30s, they can, in a matter of weeks, get the clone to that correct age.
Right. Do you think that Michael Jackson changed himself so much to protect himself from being cloned?
I would agree with that, yes.
Right, interesting. Now, when a vril or a reptile body snatches a human and takes over that human, which becomes a drone human or a vril, what happens to that? What happens to the vril's human family, mom and dad? Do they then continue the body snatching with their family, or what happens?
Depends on the importance of the individual and their surrounding family. Usually they just do, in the case, they just do the person they need, because the cabal is all about being economically efficient. So they're not going to spend resources where they don't need to. Especially, the Alpha Draco before they left, that's why they left, because it was getting too economically infeasible. The investment was becoming too high for the gains. And so now the remaining few negative groups are the Omicron, for example, and a few others, but the majority are gone now and been cleansed off them. And so, with the clones, they don't normally spend money where they don't need to spend money. They're very conscious. And on Michael Jackson, he actually did, from my information, die in the commercial. He burned to death. And so they actually were able to, with the space technology, repair him completely. But at that point, he said he didn't want to be in public anymore. So from there, the Alliance actually put out Clone. And the clone being quantumly entangled is a lot why the changes in the facial structure, the lightening of the skin, the nose falling off, things like that, because it's quantumly tied to the original. And the original still had some so badly damaged. The genetics were damaged that even when they brought him back, there were still some issues.
So let's assume that's correct for argument's sake, and that after that point, it was a clone. Michael Jackson was a clone.
The one we see in public.
The one we see in public. Then whose consciousness is inside of that clone?
In the case of the Alliance, what they do when they use a clone is the person is trained in how to soul project. And so the person will project this, the body, the original body will be protected, so that, they're by leaving enough of their soul energy in there to protect them. And also there's protection technologies that they can use to help keep the person protected. So there's enough soul in there to protect it from being possessed. And they'll project enough soul into the clone that clone has compassion and understanding and knowing all of what's going on. The Alliance doesn't do it like the Cabal, where the clone has no soul at all in it.
I'm convinced Michael Jackson was empathetic, and also because the deep state didn't like him for various reasons. And he was, when they framed him for pedophilia, it was all over the media. Whereas with the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, we see nothing on the media. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's exactly because he was helped by the Alliance. So he's projecting soul into the clone so that it's going to have the same exact personality, same exact behavior, same exact emotion, same exact empathy, everything right down the line.
So let's talk about what's happening right now with the cloning centers, reels. What's the situation right now? Is it being cleared out? From your research, what do you have to say about that?
The Cabal is drastically impaired, but it's not incapable still of producing more. They have a lot. They had many facilities. Yeah, they've lost the majority of their major dumps in the US. They're losing a lot in Canada. That's why there's a huge thing with now many of the major dumps are run on nuclear power. And so the flooding was done in Canada, weather warfare, to flood out the dumps. But unfortunately, they lost containment on the reactor. It flooded the reactor. And so there's a lot of radiation. And so people need to do radiation protocols in those areas. You can go online and find the monitoring stations and see what the levels are where you live. If you're in those level areas where the levels are high, you want to go to the NIH, the National Institute of Health. They have protocols for using iodine for treating yourself. I wouldn't recommend going and running away because right now Canada's borders are locked down. You can't. But additionally, there's many more that may be happening. So, if you can get out of ways from the affected area would be wise. But then additionally, it would be important to use I would say not iodine, but potassium iodide, the Magellan's Direct, and make up the appropriate solution based on the NIH documents so that you can do the radiation protocols which are very viable and very powerful. It's very important that people do that because in affected areas. So, a lot of these dumps are being taken out, and there are, always in war, there's casualty situations. That's a casualty situation that people need to deal with, but they still do have, other facilities. There had so many because they do it everywhere, all over the world. The Cabal's all over the world. And so they have facilities still.
Now, recently there was on the news that Britney Spears was freed, and I'm not convinced that was the real story. And I've heard that she's also been a victim of cloning. Do you want to tell us what you know about Britney Spears?
Yeah, I still need to research to see if that's the original. They got her out of the cage on the dump, because you have the original, then you have the clone, and then of course they Mark Ultra'd all of them. So it's like, which is which?
Right, I see. Absolutely. Wow. Well, Gene Decode, it's been an absolute honor to discuss this with you. I think it's a very important topic, although it sounds very far-fetched. And it only sounds far-fetched to us because it's never been presented to us before, but it's real. And there's been many testimonials about this that I've seen with Donald Marshall, which is very interesting. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Just if you live in Canada, please make sure that you go to the monitoring stations and see if you need to do the iodine protocols. If you do, please get it from Magellan's Direct, the potassium iodide. Make sure you get the kit first. You get the proper mixing instructions, and then you can get the backup packets. That's very important. If you're in an area where you're aware there's a major dump under you, and it could happen to you in that same area. So be prepared and have the materials ready so that if you need them, you have them. The time to get them isn't at the fact. The time is, be prepared. like the Boy Scout motto, always be prepared. For me, I go always, wow, I got in martial arts in the first place. So I like to be prepared for every scenario I can conceive. Like, the cabal does that. That's why I built all the domes, and so I'm realizing I have to use certain techniques of the enemy, like being prepared myself for them. So I do what I can do. So with that, and then, I would like to, let everybody know that I would be doing some Q&A soon all over the world. If you check my Telegram, we'll have those up, the dates and times of those Q&As on the Telegram, Real Gene Decode. That's not Gene Decode, but Real Gene Decode. Gene Decode, somebody else, I don't know who. It's not me.
Okay.
I don't sell stuff. Okay, if like the protocols and that, if people want them, they contact my Gmail until the website's up. I don't charge for that. You go in, you sign the liability and the disclaimer waiver, and then you get them. And you acknowledge that, and then you get them. I don't charge for that. I don't believe in that.
Thank you so much, Gene. You're a gentleman. Thank you. And we'll speak again very soon. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you, Nicholas.